This week, General Motors hosted their Energy Day in California. Electrify America had a good week with 5 new station openings, and Love's Travel Center keeps on their pattern of opening a new station each week. Let's get into it. Are you in the market for a brand new electric car? Yes? Then come closer. Have I got news for you? Our friends at the CCAN Action Fund are giving away 3 brand new EVs as a part of their 8th annual Raffle for the Planet fundraiser. That means 3 winners. If you've been looking for a chance to drive off in a brand new electric vehicle, this is it. The first place winner will drive off in a brand new Rivian, Lucid, or Porsche EV. The second place winner will drive off in a highly anticipated Rivian R2 or one of the Hyundai Ioniq lineup, or the very fun Volkswagen ID Buzz. The third place winner will get a Chevrolet Bolt, and they even cover state and federal taxes.
So they only sell 10,000 tickets, and right now less than 4,000 are sold, so those are fantastic odds.
It's only $200 per ticket, so go ahead and get yours now. To enter, go to www.evraffle.org. Pause this video right now and go to www.evraffle.org and enter to win. Or you can go down in the show notes and find the link down there. I'm here at my local Electrify America station at what is known as the Concord Mills Mall, which is a highly popular discount mall run by Simon Properties right off Interstate 85 and 485 on the north end of Charlotte. At one point, this was the most visited tourist destination in the state of North Carolina. I don't know if that still is the case. I know that it's busy as heck. Sometimes when you try to get near here and get off Interstate 85, it takes a good 20 minutes just to get off the exit, and then you're piling into this big parking lot, which is empty at the current time. Luckily, I wake up super early before everyone else rolls out of bed, so I have the place to myself right now. Starting off, there was a bit of a data anomaly in the alternative fuels data center database. There was missing stations, so I've been checking the database once a week for a couple of years, and it's always increasing. And this week, the total count of DC fast charger stalls went down by 300. And it took a little while to kind of dig into the data to see what was going on. And each week I retain last week's information, and then I download a fresh copy, and then I compare the two using database SQL commands in order to look to see what's different between the two tables. And that's how I find the new stuff. But you could also find to see what is missing in the new table versus what was in the old table. And so I went through that process, and there was 698 stations which were removed, some of which were level 2, some of which were DC fast charger. And when you sum the total amount of DC fast charger stalls that were removed, it's 638. Now, when you're looking at the data, it's a little bit unclear exactly why those were removed, but we did hear from the co-founder of Perrin, a gentleman by the name of Bill Farrow, who posted into social media last year that he had been alerted that the alternative fuels data center database was going to be doing database cleanups of stations that were no longer operational. And a couple that I spot checked, one of which was in California, was a new station. And it looks like what happened is the old entry for the station that the new one replaced was still in the database, and that's the one that got removed. So it looks like they're going through the database and doing database hygiene or data hygiene on the entries in the database in order to ensure that it's accurate. Because it's a bit of a messy hodgepodge. There's a lot of people who are able to put entries into the database, and then they may go out of business or may disappear or may move on to other career opportunities or whatever, and then these things just get stale. And so it's not the best, cleanest data. If you want a clean data set, you basically have to go to Perrin. Perrin maintains a very crisp, clean data set of what's available for DC fast chargers in the United States and Canada, and that's basically the source of truth for DC fast chargers. But the alternative fuels data center database, I knew it's kludgy, but I find it useful to see what's net new in the past week. And if you just use it for that purpose alone, it's useful. And even this week, even though the numbers went down, I was still able to find multiple stations. Like Electrify America is on the news this week because they did such a good job of opening new stations this past week, unusually high number. Tesla did a good job, Reddy did a good job, and all these CPOs are adding stations. It's just the overall stall count decrease as a result of this apparent data cleanup effort that is ongoing. So just so you know, the Alternative Fuels Data Center database is in the process of getting its act together a little bit, it looks like. And so that happened this past week. According to the Alternative Fuels Data Center database, Canada and the US has 85,134 DC fast charger stalls, which puts us close to the halfway mark, which was said to be needed by 2030, which is 180,000. So, still a useful source of information in order to do reporting on. Next, General Motors had their, what do they call it? Their Energy Day. And some of the information that came out of there was not really charging related, but one of the items was, and I personally think it's fair to say that besides Tesla, General Motors is doing more for DC fast chargers in the United States than any other car maker. And you might think, how can you say that? And the reason I can say that is because they have a partnership with ChargePoint where they're helping fund putting in stations. We see that with 060. They're putting in stations with General Motors funds. And several other CPOs around the United States are using ChargePoint hardware with General Motors funds. They have a long-standing partnership with EVgo where they're building out city chargers, and you'll see GM Energy wrapped on those chargers. They're EVgo chargers, but they're funded in part by General Motors. And of course, the Pilot Flying J build, which has been going on now for a couple of years, and it's got some very impressive numbers. We're almost up to 300 stations along travel corridors. That is chugging along. Additionally, they are a prominent member of the IONNA organization. So, I mean, when you do the sum total of all these parts, that's a very significant contribution to the overall electric vehicle charging infrastructure, not to mention all the dealerships that are putting in chargers on their property as well. And so all that combined is a pretty large booster shot, if nothing else. And the Energy Day this past week was kind of interesting. What came out of it specifically was a Energy Pass 1, which is their play to have the GM app. So this is a Cadillac. I also have a Chevrolet. Both of them are electric. And if you are a GM owner, you have opportunity to have a app, either the My Chevrolet app or the My Cadillac app. Now, when you have both cars, it gets a little confusing, but I'm not going to go into that right now. I run the My Cadillac app so we could have this car and my Chevrolet both in one app. Both my wife and I have both cars available in one app. And for us, it's the My Cadillac app. Now, that app has the ability to plot a course and add charging stations. They're adding the ability to pay for charging stations at multiple different CPOs, and the goal is to have the My GM, so My Cadillac, My Chevrolet, My GMC app, be the sole app that you need in order to navigate your charging journey on a road trip. That's the concept. So you'll be able to pay for your sessions, you'll be able to see the history of your sessions, you'll be able to have discounts applied. And IONNA already posted into social a video on how to add General Motors cars into their systems in order for this to operate. And kind of cool. Let's go ahead and take a look at that video right now. So my personal opinion, although the effort to be noble is noble, likely the outcome is just going to be it's another app. And everyone's just going to have another app on the phone. Like I got my GM app. I also have my Electrify America app. I've got my Tesla app. I've got my Blink app. I've got my ChargePoint app. On and on it goes. And now I have to, I don't know, maybe at some point in the future it'll just be the easy button and we'll post up to a station and just use the in-dash navigation to initiate charging. And actually plug and charge is really the gold standard, because I find I actually favor going to DC fast charger stations that have plug and charge, so I don't have to use an app. And for me, that's EVgo and IONNA right now. General Motors cars are able to post up to either of those and just plug in and have the charge go right away. And if we can get plug and charge working, universal plug and charge working, the app hell just goes away. So my personal opinion is that should be the end game. Next, and speaking of IONNA, is another week, so we have another IONNA billboard. This one in Sparks, Nevada, which is UFO themed. It says, "The government won't tell you, but we will. Out of this world pricing at exit 20." And this is, again, the Sparks, Nevada location, which is now being advertised on their national billboard campaign. They seem to enjoy the quirky approach to marketing communications. We had Sasquatch, we had a manatee, and now we have a UFO. Kind of curious to see what they come up with next. It's a fun team over at the IONNA Marketing Communications Group. Next, I mentioned Electrify America had a good week. They opened 5 stations, which is higher than usual for them. Sometimes they have none, sometimes they have 1, 2, 3, but this is 5 in a week, 2 of which are 12 stalls, one in Kent, Ohio at a Menards. That's one of the partnerships they have in the Midwest. And another 12 stall station in Casperano Beach, California. So 2 12 stall stations, big ones. This one behind me kind of looks like it's 4 stalls, but it's actually 6. And I'm here at very early in the morning, and it's not used, but it will be heavily used. This is a very heavily used station. It will be used throughout the day. People come, there's a lot of apartments around here, so people who have EVs come here in order to charge their cars on the weekends, you'll see. Additionally, Rocky Mountain Power in Utah, and Utah is a pretty large chunk of land that has notoriously been a charging desert, and so the local utility, Rocky Mountain Power, has been doing Electrify America commercial builds, similar to what the New York Power Authority Evolve New York stations look like, but here in Utah. They opened a 6-stall station in Midvale, Utah, and 2 IKEA stores. So actually, one of the IKEA stores I hear from a viewer has already been open for a while, and it does have an open date of 2023. So there's that one. That new database entry, just ignore that. But the other one is Live Oak, Texas, at another IKEA store. IKEA similarly has been working with Electrify America in order to put in stations. So all in all, just a really good week for the middle of the year for Electrify America. So, you know, it's the new hardware that they're putting in with bigger form factor stations when they have the opportunity to do so. They're not working with a partner. And so nothing wrong with what Electrify America has been producing as of late. However, the good folks at Love's Travel Stops have been producing a product that I would say is far superior. What Love's has baked up here is generally they put all their stations under canopies. In fact, I don't recall seeing a Love station that didn't have a canopy. Oh, wait, there might be some in California. I stand corrected. But in general, they're putting them underneath canopies, tucked up against the travel center facility. So you're only steps away from a clean restroom and hot food inside, underneath a canopy with state-of-the-art ChargePoint hardware that has the Omni port, which will dispense either a CCS1 or a J3400 handle, depending on which inlet your car has. It will you choose it in the interface as you're getting ready to start the charging session, and it will dispense whichever form factor handle you need, which is a very slick opportunity. And they've got garbage cans, squeegees. It's safe because it's staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and well lit, protected from the elements. And they've been doing one of these a week for about over a month. And the new one that they just posted into social is in Tacoma, Washington. And it's up in the Pacific Northwest. They've been doing similar type builds all around the country, and they have a pretty large portfolio of properties. And Texas has been a fan favorite of theirs as of late as well, so they've been building into Texas. And so it's good to see them continue to make forward progress. And these are handcrafted stations, so it definitely takes effort to get these in. And next, I wanted to curtail the amount of stories. I could kind of go on and on with EV news stories, but I had an interview with the owner of upstart CPO ChargedEV Hubs, which chose Tesla Supercharger for Business, which I found very interesting. And in the spirit of trying to keep this episode under 45 minutes, I'm going to curtail the number of news stories I do this week. And let's go ahead and go to that interview to close out this video instead, because I think it's a very interesting conversation of what it looks like on the inside of a CPO as you're getting ready to start selecting hardware, selecting locations, pricing, amenities, and all these things. We go over all that. So let's go to that conversation now. Hey, Jeremy, thanks for coming on to Spec Biz. These are exciting times we find ourselves. Please introduce yourself to the audience and share places you've worked and what you're currently about.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Walter. Longtime listener. I've been following you, I think, since you first started back with the Pilot Flying J video. So it's great to be on the show. Appreciate everything you do for the industry. And I've used this for the last couple of years as a way of keeping track of what stations are coming online. So it's been a huge help. So I appreciate everything you do there. So yeah, Jeremy Watrous, founder of ChargedEV Hubs. We started this company last year as a developer and operator of ultra-fast EV charging hubs. So I've spent my last 20 years in the automotive industry, began in parts distribution, working in management for AutoZone, moved on and spent about 10 years for a pair of sister companies, serving as an engineering and quality consultancy firm for automotive OEMs. So I would travel to the car factories for all the OEMs and assist on their production lines. During that work, I got the opportunity to start working with the EV manufacturers, so the EV startups like Tesla, Lucid, Rivian, Faraday, all those different companies, but the traditional OEMs as well, working on their EV product lines, and that's really what got me deep into the EV industry. So about 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, I moved over to a role working for Blink Charging, publicly traded national level 2 and DC fast charging operator. Spent a few years there in various different roles, leading automotive sales, where we deployed EV charging infrastructure to thousands of car dealerships across the country.
There's so many, right? It's like an endless sea of businesses out there.
Yeah, it was a great time in 2022 through 2024 when all the auto OEMs really wanted the car dealers to install infrastructure. And so we would come in, we would develop a program, recommending which power class of DC fast chargers and level 2 chargers would benefit them most. And, sometimes they would have to get several ultra, high power, I would say 180 kilowatt fast chargers. And in other cases, the OEMs were fine with them doing lower power units. So yeah, we deployed, over 2,000, I think over 3,000 actually ports of DC capacity. So one of the largest deployments in the country. And, we kind of replaced ChargePoint as the leading brand for the automotive dealerships. So that was a great experience. I moved on to a business development role, leading other verticals as well. And then more recently was heading up their initiatives to pivot over towards owning and operating DC fast chargers. So traditionally a level 2, hardware reseller and level 2 owner and operator. But as of late, they've moved towards owning and operating the fast charging infrastructure. I think you've seen some other announcements with ChemPower hardware being deployed as of late. So led those efforts, and then last year made the decision to split off and start my own firm, and really just wanted to, bring a new approach to how the fast charging infrastructure gets deployed. And we can touch on that later. But yeah, we've got one operational location currently in Atlanta and more in the pipeline. And look forward to talking about that more.
Yeah, there's just so much vitality out there in the DC fast charger industry. It seems there's things going on all over the place. And as you say, in the Wayback Machine, actually not too way back, just a couple of years ago, the Southeast was really a
flyover zone for EVs. You wanted to like navigate around it, kind of like what West Virginia is nowadays. It was pretty rough, unless you were in a Tesla. Tesla, you could probably get around fairly well.
Yep.
But then Pilot Flying J started to add those marquee stations with the canopies and right there on the travel centers, right off the interstate exits and everything. But the Southeast was not a target location for DC fast chargers. You mentioned your first location, your flagship location was in Atlanta. What made you consider the Atlanta and the Southeast as an area in order to start investing in and put the start your new venture with?
Yeah, so when I got my first EV about 6 years ago, it was kind of the same thing up in the mid-Atlantic. I used to live in Maryland and Pennsylvania, and you would go on a road trip, and you'd have to plan accordingly. You'd sometimes have just enough range to really make it to an ideal stop without having to divert off your route. And the Southeast, I would say, was a couple years behind that, but it's certainly gotten a lot more attention as of late. Pilot, as you mentioned, but also Mercedes and Rivian and some of the other DC operators have started to fill in that metro. Atlanta's got they got a tremendous, they have a large population, and so far they just really haven't had enough capacity online. So we target areas where there's too many drivers on the road for the amount of fast chargers that exist, and that allows us to really ensure that we're going to have strong utilization from the get-go, which is absolutely critical to operating fast charging infrastructure profitably. So, historically, there's been a lot of, grant programs that have led to, chargers getting deployed, sometimes in rural areas, which is great for the local residents and the people traveling locally. But unfortunately, those chargers tend to not get used very often, right? So, you'll see DC fast chargers that only get a few sessions a day, and then the operator ends up getting crushed by demand fees from the utility. So for those not aware, the utilities typically charge a demand fee, which is in essence a capacity charge for how large your service is. Regardless of how much you're really drawing throughout the month, it gets billed on whatever your peak draw is. And so you have one busy day, and then the rest of the month is slow, and your energy bill ends up being larger than your revenues, leading to negative margins. And that's not sustainable. So, for us, we're not looking to be the largest operator. We're looking to be the best. We're looking to deploy profitable locations so that we can redeploy capital and build additional locations. So we focus solely on the hotspots, so urban metros where there's not enough capacity, and Atlanta really fit, all the different marks we were looking for there. So through a series of events, we had a partnership that came to light with a shopping center owner. The location is called the Global Mall. They actually
Perfect place. My goodness, right off 85.
Yeah, it's 0.2 miles off of I-85, 10 minutes before you get to Atlanta. So it's perfect if you're traveling from
Great place to stop, yeah.
Greenville, Charlotte, Raleigh, really anywhere northbound, you're coming down and it's right there before you get to the city. So it's a great location. There's got dozens of retailers within the mall. There's a large food court with 7 or 8 different food options. We have a Waffle House across the street, a Papa Do's seafood factory next door, brand new C-store just opened up. So we have a tremendous amount of amenities, giving the drivers number of options for where they wish to grab a bite or go to the bathroom. And so that's one of the core things we look at is we want to have amenities. We want the drivers to have options. We want them to be able to go to the bathroom, right? Things like that. So we don't want to put these stations, just off the side of the highway between cities. Those stations do not perform well, and they make it challenging to ever recover the capital. And so we focus again on those urban hotspots where they need more capacity. And sure enough, it's worked out well for our first location. We see typically over 100 drivers in a day. Which is exactly where we were hoping to land, and that allows us to recover the capital in just a few years, and then continue to deploy additional stations. So I think you'll continue to see a lot more capacity come online in the Atlanta market. There's several other operators looking to deploy there, including other supercharger for business developers. And you also have a tremendous amount of investment in the automotive companies, right? So you have Rivian opening up their second factory right outside of Atlanta. There's an SK battery factory right up the road on 85.
Huge, yeah. You can't miss it as you drive by.
Yeah, huge facility, billions of dollars investment, thousands of jobs. So it's great. And we're really starting to see the Southeast, get a lot of battery manufacturing. Toyota has a plant up between Greensboro and Raleigh. And then we also have, IONNA's headquartered in Raleigh, Kempower's headquartered in Raleigh, Durham, Drive set up their North American headquarters over here. So it's been great to see the Southeast really take off in the last 2 to 4 years with a lot of investment of all kinds.
It just kind of happened all at once. It was really surprising.
Yep.
And the whole catch-up game that the DC fast charger industry is on, trying to catch up to the number of EVs on the road, I think it's going to be perpetual, because although the number of EV sales are decreasing, it's still like 1 million new cars coming onto the road every year, depending on what number you're tracking. There's a lot of cars that are going to be looking for chargers. But sir, you mentioned, go ahead.
We've had a little bit of a lull, right, in the sales after the tax credit expired. I don't to anybody, but the numbers are looking pretty strong. Lauren McDonald on LinkedIn was posting this week that it looks like several of the automakers are actually back to kind of their peak levels. So I think the EV penetration continues. I think we'll stabilize around the 7-8% mark in the coming months, and I think we'll be back to the 10-12% peak of new vehicle sales in no time. Everybody knows that drives an EV. They're a better product, hands down, and so it's inevitable. Yes, it's going to happen a little slower than what it might have originally been pacing, with kind of the government mandates and things like that. But that's fine. Let the natural market play out, and I think we're all going to be doing well in a few years.
Yeah, I think the initial hype was creating a bit of a unrealistic fervor that has since kind of mellowed out. And now we're just looking at a standard increase of new vehicles. And like you said, I'd say Q1 probably back at double digits, somewhere like that. But it's speculation.
Yeah, it's the automotive OEMs, right? They're planning these vehicles 6-7 years out, really, right? So roadmaps are very distant to the future, which also makes it challenging for them to pivot as they look to maybe scrap some of these EV programs. And then it'll take time as they look to bring out new models that can be competitive. But unfortunately, I think many of them realized that they weren't going to be able to sell these vehicles profitably, and so they scrapped them. You look at the F-150, for example, great product. A lot of people love it. It was, generally speaking, well received. But they decided that it made more sense to pivot and scrap that rather than burn more capital and come out with their next generation range extended vehicles, which is fine. And
I'm hearing words of an Escape 2 coming in the not too distant future out of the Louisville assembly plant, but that still seems to be a little bit ephemeral. But you mentioned reliability, and without going into any NDA territory, can you give us some of the reasons why you selected to join this Tesla Supercharger for Business program for build and station operations?
Yeah, so, there's been a number of different options over the years. Just dozens of companies moving in from Asia and Europe, trying to push their hardware. Obviously in China, the EV market is many years ahead of us, right? You look at some of the Nordic countries, there's even 90% EV penetration in some of those countries. And so you've had large players out of Europe like Alpitronics and Kempower, and then a number of brands out of China, no-name companies, and then larger companies like Autel. But everybody's been looking for a new market to push their product as the growth starts to slow down in China and kind of slow down a little bit in Europe. And so this led to a tremendous amount of options in the United States. Quite frankly, it led to too much competition and forced several brands to kind of shut down and vacate the market, since there was just no profits to be had. But there's been one common theme, which is that nothing really has been reliable except for Tesla Superchargers. Many of the networks have gotten much better. Electrify America, EVgo, right? They're much better than they were a few years ago. Still not quite where it needs to be, and that's unfortunately led to a bad impressions with a lot of the early adopters. Many of us are willing to deal with those challenges in the early days of the industry, but as we move towards a mass market, growth of EVs, people aren't going to put up with the lack of reliability. And so everybody's been improving. Everybody's learned their lessons over the years, but we continue to see Tesla be hands down the most reliable option out there. The vehicles continue to be the majority of EVs on the road, even if they slowly but surely are losing a little bit of market share to all the competitors. But with the entire industry adopting the NACS plug and moving over towards that, it really just gives the Tesla Supercharger network the ability to kind of dominate, right? So we're focused on EV driver experience. We want them to always be able to have a charge on their first attempt. Too many of these networks, drivers have to plug in and unplug and plug back in, and the credit card terminal doesn't work, this doesn't work, and it's just a bad experience. And with Tesla, you just plug in the connector and it starts charging and build your credit card automatically. Even with the non-Tesla vehicles like Rivian and many others, there's the plug and charge capability as well, right? So just wanting to ensure that we would have 99.9% uptime was kind of the reason why we went with the Tesla hardware. And ultimately, you can't run a profitable business if the chargers go down for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. That really crushes your profitability for the month or the quarter. And so, with the Tesla hardware, we have the assurance that it's always going to be operational. And as soon as we have an issue, their technicians are on site, typically within a day, and it's fixed.
Yeah, some of the new entrants will say, yeah, we're working on a nationwide maintenance program with the third parties. And you don't want to bet the farm. You want to bet the farm on someone who's been repairing and very publicly in the news quickly their chargers. They'll show up to Coachella and do a pop-up supercharger, or if there's a vandalism event, they'll show up and they'll replace the whole station or something. And
it's incredible.
Very vibrant service network.
Yep. And the Tesla program is also great for operators in that they actually cover all of the maintenance themselves, right? So it's not like an extended warranty plan, which is really what every other hardware manufacturer does. You pay money up front, you get this extended warranty. You're really still responsible for monitoring the station and notifying them of issues. With the majority of the operators out there, if you have an extended warranty, your station could go down for 2 months. And if you're not calling in and demanding that they get somebody out there to fix it, chances are it stays broken for weeks or months.
Or it could be just like parts depot where they ship you parts and then you're on your own to get it replaced or whatever.
Exactly.
So I see from your website that you bring charging to partner locations, and a lot of retailers, C-stores, you mentioned perhaps QSRs are looking for ways of augmenting with putting EV charging just to get additional foot traffic. And I'm guessing you provide a turnkey service for them to provide EV charging at their locations. Is that about the approach that you take with partners?
We do. So at the end of the day, we're a very flexible organization, and we can handle as little or as much of the process as they would like. Typically, with the shopping center type customers, the property owners of those parcels, they're really just looking to generate some additional income. The foot traffic is great, but it mostly benefits the other tenants of the property. But they just want some flat rent out of the operator. They don't want to be involved in anything, and that's fine, right? We can come in. We sign a lease with them. We'll deploy all the charging hardware. It's our capital. We handle the installation, start to finish, permitting, every single bit of it. And then there's other cases where, it might be a C-store operator and they do actually want to be a little bit involved in some cases. And that's fine. We can come in, we can build the station for them very cost effectively. And then they can be the owner of record afterwards if they would like.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that was an option.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we'll serve basically as a developer, right? We build it all and turn over possession once the station is operational. And we can continue to provide operational services. So, we'll charge a management fee and we'll monitor the station to put an extra set of eyes on it, in addition to Tesla, if we're deploying Tesla hardware. And we actually have what we call the ChargedEV Cloud, which is a charger management system that we've developed in-house. And this takes the data from the Tesla chargers and builds just a really robust set of analytics on the station performance. So there's automated notifications. If we start to see one dispenser is not being used as much as another dispenser, it triggers an alert. You can look at the average speeds, the average session length, the failed attempts, all these different metrics. And so it's just a really user-friendly interface that allows the operator to log in and view how the station is performing. And the same thing for any investors that invest in our projects. They actually have this real-time visibility into the location, so it's full transparency, and they can see exactly how the station is doing, both from performance, but also like revenue generation purposes and what the margins look like. So shopping centers are our main focus in the sense that it provides multiple amenities for the drivers, but C-stores and QSRs certainly as well. So with the C-store or the QSR operators, rather, quick serve restaurants, fast food, for those not aware, our stations can bring in another 100 vehicles to the property a day, right? So that's pretty significant
Yeah, as long as you got spaces for it, and those spaces aren't getting used elsewhere, where there's really no reason not to.
So that's oftentimes a challenge, right? A lot of the fast food properties, unfortunately, don't have the space. And so you have to look past those locations. That's the first thing we look at is there ample space for the charging stalls, and then also the gear, right? Because we have a transformer, switch gear, power conversion cabinets. It's not a ton of space, but it is some. And so that does eliminate, probably maybe 2/3 of the fast food properties. But for the third that remains, if they've got the extra space, why not monetize it, and why not drive additional traffic to the property? So, that QSR owner, they may be a franchisee. They may be just
shooting fish in a barrel when you're sitting there in your car charging and you smell something cooking inside. You just can't stand to go inside. You get
everyone's going to go inside, right? Like you pretty much know that person's most likely going to get inside and get a burger, get a coffee, whatever it may be. And they've got the bathrooms, right? So it's super convenient. You're not walking, 100 yards away to get to a storefront. So it just works. Yep.
Well, very well. It's super exciting, and I'm pretty sure the amount of insatiable sea of QSRs and C-stores out there, which will start looking over the fence at their neighbors getting electric vehicle charging, are start going to be knocking on your door as well. But what can we look forward to from ChargedEV Hubs for the rest of 2026 and maybe into 2027, sir?
Yeah, so many different things going on, busy times here. So we've got a second project that is completing permitting as we speak. That location is going to be in the Raleigh Metro, so it's in Morrisville, North Carolina, the kind of the heart of the RTP. So we're bringing picture. Yeah, it's actually surprising because North Carolina, the EV penetration is not the best. It pretty much is mostly in Raleigh and Charlotte. But you look at the RTP and some of the zip codes over there, nearly 1 in 10 of the registered vehicles, not just new car sales, but all vehicles on the road, are EV. And you have a ton of people coming to the biotech companies and all the different startups and things like that. So it's a great little, pocket of demand that we're looking to fill. And, we're also headquartered in Raleigh, go Canes. And so, we want to have some stations locally, even if our, target markets are also elsewhere. So, we're deploying it everywhere from Florida up through Pennsylvania. So, Atlanta, Orlando, Miami, Baltimore, Washington, DC. And, eventually we'll have a large presence in Raleigh and Charlotte as our home state. But yeah, we're looking to ramp up the pace of deployment. So we've got hundreds of stalls in the pipeline at various stages, some of them under contract, some of them in permitting, and many of them just in the due diligence phase where we work with utility companies to confirm they can bring the power in. So we'll proceed on those. We just won some grant programs up in the Mid-Atlantic. So we're going to be deploying a station there starting pretty soon. But we've also got our ChargedEV Solutions division, which is more focused on level 2 chargers. So when we have multifamily properties, workplaces that want to have slow overnight chargers, we can come in and deploy the level 2 chargers for them as well. So it's not just the fast charging infrastructure, even though that's our focus, but we are going to be helping out several different multifamily properties with the level 2 chargers. And then we've also built out a wide suite of tools, which we call the ChargedEV tools. So if you go to our website, ChargedEVHubs.com, there's a ton of information on our fast charging locations, what we can bring to property owners, what we can bring to individuals looking to own stations, because we do encourage individuals that would like to partake in this to reach out, and we can collaborate and build stations for them. But the ChargedEV Tools is a suite of tools that we've developed specifically for deploying this infrastructure at scale. So we're an AI native firm. And what that means is that, we've started the company in this AI era. And, it's not just pinging, ChatGPT or Claude for some answers here and there. It's developing every single process of the organization to be streamlined and efficient, utilizing the power of these AI tools. So everything from site selection, we track the utilization levels of every single Tesla supercharger nationwide. We know exactly which ones are the busiest. We know which ones are the slowest. And what that does is it allows us to avoid the areas where the superchargers already exist and they're slow, and focus on where the superchargers are just too busy and they need more capacity in those local areas. Sorry, say that again.
The hotspots.
The hotspots, exactly. So our AI tools then moves to site prospecting, where it analyzes those hotspots. It then suggests which properties could be a strong fit. It looks at travel patterns and different things like this. We then reach out personally. We don't want to have just AI agents reaching out and kind of spamming everybody. So we reach out personally to these property owners, let them know what we can do. And then, we can design the sites in our software. We can project manage them in our software. We can make offers to the property owners with our software. So we have these purpose-built AI tools for every step of the process. And that allows us to scale the business without this large amount of overhead. Because if you look at the traditional, publicly traded and private EV charging operators, they've had just tremendous overhead that far exceeds their gross profit. And so they're just continue to burn cash year after year, and that's just not sustainable. So we're focused on being profitable for our entire existence. We're already cash flow positive and profitable with just
wow.
Yeah. So no need to raise capital and fund our operations. We raise capital to deploy stations and only to deploy stations. And so we plan to continue that. We never expect to post a single month of a loss. And that's our focus, because there's been too many companies that have just, incinerated billions of dollars of capital. And, we're not going to build stations just to build stations. We're not going to win a grant and put a station in the middle of nowhere. I don't believe in that personally. We're going to focus on stations that are going to be used heavily, that are going to be profitable, and let us generate a return for our investors and deploy additional stations.
And provide a benefit to the EV drivers, for sure.
Yeah, we want
mission you're on.
Useful at the end of the day for the EV drivers, right? Not just, it's always great when you have a station out in the middle of nowhere for that person that happens to be driving there that day. But, one driver a day, it just doesn't, doesn't make a business.
Fully understand. Well, Jeremy, much appreciated for coming on out of Spec Bits, and best wishes in the future. We'll be sure to keep in touch and maybe check in again as maybe the year draws to a close, or we start into the new year to see what the future holds for ChargedEV Hubs at that time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Walter. I appreciate the time.